Okay, well, so thanks all for coming on out here. It's a very hot Saturday. It's going to be 100 again. Yesterday I was out on patrol. It was only 104. So if it's only 100 today, it's going to feel nice and cool. Let me just throw everybody on mute here 1 second. And again, if anybody has questions, you can put them in the chat. If there's something going horribly wrong, put it out there. Carol can come down the hall and tell me, and we'll try to fix it. But going to talk about Expo 70 today, which was held in Osaka, Japan. Expo 70 was really a very, very popular, successful World's Fair. Like most World's Fair, it ran for 6 months. It went from March 15th to September 13th, 1970. And it was, again, as the name implies, held outside of Osaka. And unlike many other World's Fairs, they didn't have to take a rail yard or a junkyard or anything and purify it for the fair. They were able to use grounds out there, some nice hills and other areas on it. But when I mentioned it being popular, it got 64 million people during those 6 months, which if you consider that's about what the New York World's Fair got in 2 years, it did in 1. And it remained the highest and most well-attended World's Fair until Shanghai 2010. And you have to also look at what Shanghai did was that they gave out free tickets to people in the villages, the peasants outside. They gave them free bus rides to come in, and then they started ordering them that they had to go to it because the Chinese government was determined to make Shanghai 2010 the most successful World's Fair ever. So for non-coerced or non-forced attendance, Expo 70 still remains a major milestone. There were 78 countries that participated and 4 international organizations. There were 3 states from the United States. There were some different things, British colonies, that sort of thing. So it was truly a World's Fair. Matter of fact, it was called what they call a Class 1 exhibition. Which is the largest class of fair sanctioned by the Bureau of International Exhibitions. And I believe it was the first Class 1 that was ever held in Japan. They had had a lot of small World's Fairs or exhibitions in Japan over the years. Osaka actually had one in 1903, but those were technical ones, mostly showing off the latest and greatest things in machinery, farm implements, things along that line. But Expo 70 was the first big blowout World's Fair, held in Japan. They gave the award, the BIE gave the award May 11th, 1966. So they had 4 years to clear the ground, build the facility, and get it into operation. And 4 years is pretty aggressive, and they made it very successful. If you start reading about fairs, there's different ones with different problems or whatever. Most people would say Expo 70 pretty much went off without a hitch. Crowds cooperated, the weather cooperated, and I don't know if it eventually finally made a profit or not. I wasn't able to find any real, Randy Lopes is giving a thumbs up that it did make a profit. I always take the profit thing with a grain of salt when you're dealing with governments that sponsor these things. They can make anything a profit if they want. But it was a big fair, and I'm going to start with a clip from a movie about it. If we all remember back to the days of the 1962 Seattle World's Fair that was set at, you had the Elvis Presley movie, it happened at the World's Fair, was set there at the 62 Fair. Well, it was actually a movie set at the Expo 70 that was kind of interesting. And if I can share my screen and bring this up, we'll see if you get a kick out of this. So share screen, optimize your video clip, share sound, and here we go. See if we can give this a try.
Green blue square in the middle of the screen.
Yeah, I don't know why it's there. Well, I'm going to jump up ahead here. If this was Gamera versus, I think it was called Jigger or Jiger. It was in the United States. It was known as Gamera versus Monster X. So they did an interesting thing here, which I'll jump up here to the part that I want. They basic plot of the movie was that they take this relic off an island, bring it to Expo 70. That upsets this monster that is determined to get this thing back, and Gamera, the giant flying turtle, comes to the rescue. So the very beginning, we're going to go out and see Expo 70 during the time that it's under construction. I'm just trying to figure out if I close. I guess we're going to have to go with the blue square right now. So let me just run out here and we'll get a real quick preview of Expo 70.
スーザンから来て絵はがきだよ。ここ入ってるやないの。じゃあ行ってきます。あ、ひろし、ケンスケさんにね、帰りに寄るように言って。夕飯の支度しとくから。オッケー。やっぱしな。
お
ー。
トミーのパパが写したんだって。
ええ、うまいもんだな。
ウエスター島ってどこにあんの？
南太平洋赤道直下だよ。
でも変な石像があるんだね。
うん。その石像をバンコク博に展示するためにトミーのパパウィリアム博士がウエスター島まで受け取りに行かれたのさ。
どうしてこんな石像をバンコク博に展示すんの？
それはいい質問だ。それにはまずバンコク博のことから説明しなければね。
うわー、すっげえ綺麗だな。
これがバンコク博の会場だ。1970年3月15日から9月13日まで大阪千里ヶ丘で開催されるんだ。全世界70カ国以上が参加して、それぞれの国が誇る新しい産業や文化を素晴らしい演出で展示するパビリオンが100以上も建てられるんだよ。
まるで未来の都市へ来たような気がするよ。
そうだね。新しく宇宙時代を迎えた人類の素晴らしい科学の進歩、技術の発展の成果をよりすぐって見せてくれるんだからね。人類の進歩と調和が今度のバンコク博のテーマなんだ。会場の中心のテーマ館では人類の進歩の歴史を振り返ってもらおうと。太陽の塔の内部に見てごらん。生命の木を飾り、アメーバーから魚類、昆虫、恐竜、マンモス、原始人と進化し続けてきた生命の流れを模型を使って分かりやすく見せるんだよ。もちろん古代文化の遺物もいくつか展示される。
そこで圭介さんの考古学が役に立つってわけ。
そう。遠く宇宙や未来にばっかり目を向けないで、我々地球のことも少しは知らなきゃ。ウエスター島の石像だってまだまだ考古学では謎なんだ。さあ次行こう。高さ約10メートルの巨大な石像は一体誰が何の目的でいつの時代に作ったのか何にも分かっちゃいないんだ。
へえ。
広報部の澤田圭介さん、事務所へお帰りください。広報部の澤田圭介さん、事務所へお帰りください。
So in the background here, you can see the USSR pavilion off to the left-hand side and the Tower of the Sun off to the right. Those are actually models. Everything here on that part of the thing is a match shot with the models. The Expo 70 corporation said that they could use the Expo and they could use these models, but they could not show the monsters actually destroying any part of Expo. So I'll see if I can find it real quick up here. If I jump up ahead, you can see.
実よ。このままではジャイガの極超音波でガメラ耳の黒くをやられてしまう。
カメラ、自分の耳を塞ぐんだ。
So you can see here what they did was they used the models and they had a big battle that went off in the background. So they destroyed apartment buildings, power plants, all sorts of other things, but they were not allowed to to show any of Expo 70 being destroyed. So basically, they had a model of the USSR pavilion, the Tower of the Sun, put them closer together than they were in real life, which is the same liberty we took in Iron Man 2 and Tomorrowland. But just kind of interesting that the whole premise here of this particular movie was that the giant turtle figure on the right had to come and save Expo 70 from being destroyed by the monster lying there on the ground. So very strange movie. I just saved you an hour and a half of agony trying to watch it. It's actually kind of different. But these things were very, very popular. I think this is the 4th or 5th movie with Gamera the giant turtle. And he did come to save the day, and then everybody goes back to their monster islands and live there. So we're going to take a look now at some pictures of Expo 70. So we'll start again. If you let me share this screen. 1 second here. Okay, share screen. So we're back here now looking at, I'm still getting that square on my my picture. I do not know why I'm getting it. It's there. Hang on here 1 second. Stop share. I'm going to share screen. This time I'm going to not optimize it for video clip and see if that helps at all. Okay, so that seems to help there. I don't know why the other one was doing. This is the same parking lot those characters in the movie were just out at. It's soon going to be full of buses. This is the main bus parking area for Expo. And you can see things are well under construction. This was about 6 months before the event opened. As we look at it, you can see they put all sorts of signs up on things as typical for buildings or fairs under construction. Nobody knows what they are without a giant sign on it, so it helps the construction crews know where they're going, let people know what they're doing. Like other World's Fairs, they started doing VIP tours and letting people onto the site. You could actually go out and buy tickets, come out and get a tour of it. Here's our tour guide giving us a nice tour. The Canada Pavilion in the background, and this particular tour group was from Canada, so naturally they would go and get a visit to their pavilion. Again, more of Canada. British Columbia, like other World's Fairs, a lot of things like these were logs that were brought in from British Columbia. So we've seen in other World's Fairs how they would build a building in Japan, bring it over, pop it down in New York, and erect it with Japanese craftsmen. They did the opposite here. They would take materials from some of the international pavilions, bring them over to Japan and build them. Again, temporary signs that are put up all over the place to let us know what's coming underway. And here's a typical one. It's kind of interesting that the signs were both in English and in Japanese. You would think that they would have to certainly have them in Japanese for construction crews, but again, they were trying to bring a lot of the foreign press onto the site and get advanced publicity going on for what was coming for the fair. So just a few quick shots there. I'm going to jump into a reel now of publicity commercial slides that were sold at the fair and kind of give you an idea of what's going on with most of them. This was the Tower of the Sun. It was in the center of the theme structure for the World's Fair, which was basically a large, I will see more pictures of it, a large metal roof elevated above the ground, open down below, with a giant circle in the center that the tower stuck through. The idea here was that they wanted to come up with something space age, but they also wanted to have it light and airy in approach, and you'll see that in some of the other pictures. And I got a real kick out of the this particular tower, which still is with us today, and we'll see him in later years. The Japan Pavilion, massive pavilion, these 5 discs all scattered around a central court. Basically, as you can imagine, why Japan? Well, first of all, things on Japan history and how it got to where it was. But Japan as an industrial might, as a tourist might, and trying to talk about, again, things for ecology was now starting to come up on the forefront of people's minds. Thailand had a very colorful pavilion. We remember the one from the 60 World's Fair was pretty much gold and white. They went all out with colors on this particular one. Interesting night view. Off to the right was the electric power pavilion, and off in the back, the Furukawa pavilion, done in the traditional pagoda type style. That pavilion on the left shows up in a lot of pictures. It was very popular. It was also very tall. It wasn't the tallest pavilion at Expo 70, though. That honor went to the USSR. We've talked about in the past how they tried to be the tallest pavilion. Actually, quite a few times they tried it. They tried it in the early Paris exhibition just before World War II. They certainly tried it at the 1939, 1940 New York World's Fair. So in this particular one, they did succeed and they had the tallest one there at the fair. The gas pavilion, kind of interesting here, this blobby sort of shape off to the left and then Quebec to the right. Not only did you have certain things like the US pavilion and you had the state of Washington, but you also had things like the Canada pavilion and the province of Quebec. So you had not just some national pavilions, but also states or territories within them. Very colorful here, Zambia. The Expo 70 attracted a lot of nations that do not have histories of exhibiting at other World's Fairs. Bulgaria, Zambia, some others. So it's kind of interesting to see some of the different ones that came to be. The gondolas were called sky cabins. Again, by this point in time, it seemed mandatory that every World's Fair have a skyway and a monorail. So Expo 70 had both. In the background, you can see the soaring tower with the hammer and sickle of the USSR pavilion and the Swiss pavilion over to the right, which the boy in the film described as a city of the future. This very colorful one was called the Rainbow Tower. You can see the monorail passing by in front of it. You can sometimes spot that these things were done during construction because if you look off to the front of the monorail, there's still a crane working underway. One thing that Expo 70 did a lot was inflatable structures, giant balloons. This one here, for example, Rico off to the left, that giant balloon would go up and down, held on guy wires. If you watch it in movies, you can see it lifted up and going back down. Kodak had a very popular pavilion, and it's very interesting that a lot of Expo 70 was sort of monochromatic if you look at the style. Kodak, very bright colors of their orange and red, which they were using in their packaging at the time. You compare how eye-catching that is to the Ricoh pavilion off to the left or the other pavilions in the background. And the Kodak people really knew what they were doing because in pictures, the Kodak pavilion really just pops out and stands out. Kind of a general view of what you'd see coming in from the west gate. The place was still under construction. You can see piles of material down below the lights and that. But again, look at the pavilion. We'll get a closer view of it. Again, another inflatable pavilion off to the left there. Aerial view overhead, Russia way in the background, the Tower of Sun down below. More work going on in the center of it. And here I mentioned the theme pavilion had this airy roof type structure, very large lattice metal work. The Tower of the Sun standing out in front of it. The monorail helps give you an idea of just how big the Tower of the Sun, I was going to say was, but is because it's still there with us. USSR, it's a water feature down below, a moving sidewalk in the tube off to the right. Again, Canada, very popular. They had two different theaters in here with movies, other displays about Canada, but the movies were well received. This is the Fuji group. Again, inflatable things. You think about the storm we were just talking that Michelle had in New Jersey this week. If a storm like that had come through the Expo 70 site, you wonder how many of these pavilions would have been ripped loose from their moorings and ended up in, just down the road a bit. Nice nighttime view. Again, the tower, the pagoda tower off to the right. Almost the tallest one at the fair, but not quite. Somebody got a little artistic here with a filter and some views of Thailand. Netherlands having a very modern concrete structure, very different than what I would have expected at World's Fair. Netherlands having more of a in my business, they're more of an agricultural bent than a giant industrial type place, but they went for that look here. Again, the Furukawa Tower in the background. Off to the right side at Burma. This is kind of interesting. The British Pavilion, very large pavilion. They went a number of structures. The British Pavilion, the U.S. Pavilion, the Australia Pavilion, all went with the idea of how do we hold up the buildings from above so we can make a lot of the exhibit space in between without columns and that. So Expo 70 did an awful lot with suspended roof design and also with, as I mentioned earlier, inflated pavilions. We're at opening day. His Majesty the Emperor is giving a speech out there and welcome everybody out to the event. Massive opening ceremonies with all sorts of performers. Just like the Olympics underway right now, you had a parade of the participants coming in with the national flags. Hosts and hostesses in the costumes you can see lined up here behind the fellows in the gray uniforms. Big opening day ceremonies. Traditional garb from Japan. This is the Japanese contingent coming in for their appearance at the opening day ceremonies. And lots of things, Japanese ceremonies with dance, dragons, all sorts of things going on. Mentioned earlier about suspended roofs. Here's two of them in one shot. You have the U.S. Pavilion down below and then the Australia Pavilion just up to the right. The USA Pavilion went through massive design changes. They were thinking it had originally been projected that they were going to spend around $960 million on the U.S. Pavilion. When it finally got done with Congress, they were given a third of the amount of money to do it. The Cold War was very much in full swing going on at this point. You had the U.S. and USSR both trying to beat each other in space and everything else. So the U.S. for only having a budget of I think it came out to 400 million, something like that, when they were finally done, went for as large a volume area as they could to do, and that this was the design they came up with. There's actually a site out on the internet that goes through, I think, about at least 20 different designs that were kicked around for the USA Pavilion, and this is the one that they came up with. The hit of the USA Pavilion was a piece of moon rock. This was brought back by the crew of Apollo 12. Very, very popular. Brought over there under very high security, and they made the most of the precautions taken to protect it. It was under glass and bulletproof glass, and not something you just reach out and touch, but very popular. They also brought in things. So this was a mock-up of the lunar module for Apollo 11. And they also brought in the actual Apollo 8 capsule. So this is reminiscent of the Expo 67 displays that have been so popular, using actual flight tested spacecraft and a combination of models and other things in there. U.S. Pavilion was very popular and very well received with crowds. Australia Pavilion, just down the road. Again, let's hold up the building from outside. So build this giant concrete tower, put steel cables down. We can hold up our theater and everything from the outside and give us a lot of exhibit space inside. The gondola ride, Switzerland again. Here's a nice overhead view of the Tower of the Sun and the theme structure. Lots of shaded area down below. There were actually a couple other smaller towers. We'll get a view of them down below underneath as well. But this was really, really large. Again, to get an idea of the size of it, look off to the left and you can see cars and trucks down there, how small they are. A huge, huge structure here. There was one major architect for the theme structure and the overall look and feel of Expo 70. I would totally mispronounce his name, so I won't try. But he also had a crew of 12 other architects that worked with him as the design committee, coming up with as much of a unified look and feel for the main structures as possible. One of the things they did was they created a number of plazas around the area. They were named after the days of the week. So in this particular case, we're looking at what's called Tuesday Plaza. It helped give a orientation to the names, so the signs could tell you how to get to Sunday Plaza, Monday Plaza, Tuesday Plaza, that sort of thing. The giant moving sidewalk that went through the fair site is stretching across the picture here, and Australia down just below. So this picture would have been taken just about over the U.S. Pavilion. This is Sunday Plaza, the Rainbow Tower off to the right. I mentioned the Rico balloon before. You can see here it's been raised up a bit in the air. Again, this is all still during construction, hence the vehicles and everything all over the place. The Bridge of Progress, they, again, just like every other World's Fair, you have to come up with great names for everything, and this was no exception. The structure in the center was a thing about fairy tales, and you could go and hit different fairy tales from around the world were being told at different times. This is the electric power one again. This is what it looked like from the top down below with that big disc we saw lit up in the evening. And preview crowd, again, construction underway. You can see the vehicles there. But as I mentioned earlier, they would bring the press and other tour groups through, and you can see a bunch of them marching through the fairgrounds off on the right. More construction, giant parking lots. You could come here by train, by car, by bus, and you can see just how close the rest of the city of Osaka, just outside the fairgrounds. And those are some of the buildings that the monsters were able to destroy in their movie because they were not part of the fairgrounds proper. Great Britain, they had a nice design of the Union Jack up on the roof, and again, the tower is all suspending it out there in the air. We're over Wednesday Plaza now. We'll see more of these pavilions as we get down on the ground. Germany Pavilion, this is very early in construction. We'll see more of Germany, but Germany's disc out here at the 6 o'clock position. You would come off of this ramp, work your way down around the corkscrew shape down there, and there were exhibits we'll see about different factors of Germany out along that those terraced areas. It's kind of interesting. This is over the area called Expo Land. It was the thrill ride part of the fair, just like you had the gateway in some U.S. fairs, the lake amusement area, that sort of thing. The rides were concentrated over here. It allowed it to stay open at different hours than the rest of it. The area, see if my mouse shows up here. Yeah, when I'm moving the mouse around here, this is a giant roller coaster, which had 5 different tracks here, 3 and 2 over here. But they didn't all stay together for the entire route of it. They would split off so you can see different tracks of it going all the around the fairgrounds. Nighttime view. Inside the USSR pavilion, you had all the latest about the Soviet space program. So we're going back to the days of the Soyuz capsules. So we have here the Soyuz 4 and Soyuz 5 docking, just as we had been docking our space capsules up there. They were doing the same thing, and rudimentary ideas starting to build a mini space station. They had both models of historical satellites, Vostok 1 and Sputnik and other things there. They also had mock-ups and prototypes of things that were to go out into space. Switzerland looked really nice at night. Tower of the Sun, you had these bright lights and these 2 circles here shining. We can see some other pictures coming up, just how impressive they were at night, the way it was lit up. This was also under the roof. This was called the Tower of Youth. Another interesting exhibit. Youth being full of energy is climbing up the tower and boarding around. I guess this was really pole dancers. IBM in the background had a big pavilion, had an IBM 360 computer that people could come and pose questions to. They also had some more of a traditional Japanese look. This would not look out of place in many Japanese villages, the particular design. This is kind of interesting one. Mitsui Group kind of looked like a giant spider to me. And off to the left, you had Toshiba. Again, lots of industrial pavilions. Hitachi having a very large one. And here's a nice view of nighttime with those lights shining off the Tower of the Sun. Robots were a big thing, so you could go into Fuji and get an example of a robot. Some of these robots could do artwork for you. Some of them would tell stories. They were all sorts of different things that they were there to entertain. And Australia, and off to the side, Germany there. Kubota, another one of the Japanese industrial ones, kind of interesting how almost everything is upstairs. Japan mentioned earlier that those 5 discs, they would change color at night. We had the water in the front is called the Dream Pond, had a number of interactive fountains, and some of them shot down an amazing amount of water. This is another water work, the Heaven Pond. That's the backside of the Tower Sun with that darker face on the seen above the fountains there. And we're taking a little tour around. They had these VIP trams you could go around. That's the Brazil Pavilion back there. Little food kiosks and stuff around the grounds. Textiles. Lots of performers. Here they're doing the limbo. So most nations were encouraged to bring over performers from their territories or countries to perform. Some did short stints at the fair. Others were there for the duration, entertaining in the pavilions. Dream Pond, again, I mentioned some of the fountains, impressive amounts of water. So this one is a giant block. We'll see other pictures of it held up in the air and the water coming down, shooting out of it. USSR, dry rocks down below are going to be filled up with water, which became very popular with people with sore, hot feet to go and stick your feet in the water and rest a bit. So let's get on to some more pictures. So we're going to be coming in, so this particular one's kind of dark. It's coming through the entranceway. Somebody is coming in kind of late at night. So silhouette view, we'll come back for a daytime view of it. But the fountains out there, you got the water spider pond, Malaysia in the background. So you have an interesting mixture of designs here. You had the gas pavilion off to the side here, a very modern design. You had Malaysia with Asian motif there. British Columbia off to the right. This one, to me, makes fairs so fascinating, so much in one area. The bus parking lot has now been finished and is very popular. It's very interesting to see how much so many of the buses look exactly alike. So I would imagine you had to be very, very careful, remember exactly where your bus was parked, and remember exactly what bus you were on, or you might find yourself going home with a whole different bunch of friends and neighbors at night. The Takara Beautylon, got beauty and makeup and stuff, I believe. Moving sidewalk up ahead. Most of the area was fairly well paved over because they had to handle a massive amount of crowds. But they did have some nice flower beds and splashes of color to break it up. Not a tremendous amount of trees out on the site, but they did have a good amount of flowers for color and variety. Again, more inflatable buildings. Part of the Japan Pavilion. There's a VIP group getting to go into the USA Pavilion early in the day. No big lines yet, but very often these metal barriers were just full to capacity of people coming out. Out in the bus parking lot, little restroom out there. Switzerland again. And just some general views. When I said they got 64 million people at Expo, this kind of gives you an idea of why they were able to get that number of people. Big wide streets, and again, some trees, but very young, immature trees, not going to give you a lot of shade. But luckily, the weather tended to cooperate. I was reading this week that Dubai right now is 125 degrees this week. So if anybody thinking about going to Expo 2020, which of course is being held in 2021, Dubai is going way out of their way to try to figure out misters and other things to pull it down. So I do not have that high in my list of events to go to right now. So kind of a nice view of Dream Lake. In the background, we have the Expo Tower. We'll see more of that coming up. That's over at Expo Land. More of the VIPs going into the US Pavilion. And just some nice general view. This was called the West Side Boulevard. Everything had names, and the signs were both in English and in Japanese, so it helped foreign tourists get around throughout the facility. More about Dream Lake and some of the fountains out there. Luckily, a lot of the pavilions had the names on them, so like the Steel Pavilion. Again, Kodak showed up very well over there to the right. One thing they did do well was they put a lot of benches in. So if people did need to sit down and rest, you could bring your own food, have a snack. You could go to any of the snack bars, take your food out and rest. But there were just places to sit and get get off your feet for a little period of time. However, the sun in the background with side view showing both the front and back faces of the tower. It's kind of interesting here to see how much they did in English. They had the electronic signboards, which had first been popularized at Expo 67 in Montreal. They put the same sort of signboards in all throughout the Expo 70 site, and they would put up messages both in English and Japanese. So they're trying to tell you, come on over to the theme pavilion, come over the east side of the Tower of the Sun. It's not crowded, so very, very helpful. Japan pavilions and the fountains roaring in the lake. More Switzerland. The lattice work in this always reminded me of one of the Expo 67 pavilions, which I think was Netherlands. More in Japan. Kodak, again, the bright colors that I mentioned, you can see how much they stand out from the other pavilions and really draw your eye into it. So if you wanted to go get film, you were able to go get it easily. And some more of the general view of the pavilions. They went, as a lot of these pavilions or fairs have done in years after the 64 World's Fair, they went more for movies as opposed to giant ride mechanisms. Ride mechanisms cost a lot of money. Movies are much cheaper to make. So you had an awful lot of movies that were done out here. Matter of fact, the Fuji Pavilion had the first IMAX theater, excuse me, ever shown. Sorry. Again, good sized crowds. Kind of interesting little fountain water just jumping in jets there. Excuse me, I need a drink. Thank you. So lots of pictures of kids playing there, trying to catch the water in their hands and just jumping back and forth. Expo Hall, and this was two things. Expo Museum off to the left and Expo Hall. These were built as theme structures by the Fair Corporation, and they could have art shows in them, and they were intended to stay and last after the Expo 70 itself ended. So they were built to a high standard and left in place. We're going to hop to some more pictures. 1 second here. And let me see, where will I jump to next? I'll try this one. This was very washed out, horrible picture, very overexposed, but this was inside the Mormon Pavilion. Again, the Christus statues, such as we've seen at the 64 World's Fair or others, the Mormons had a very popular pavilion, well attended, and I don't know where this particular Christus ended up, but they had interior displays. These are all of the Mormon Pavilion. I don't know how many people they were able to successfully convert over, but they had quite a contingent over there and would go. Again, these pictures are pretty bad. Whoever took them totally overexposed them. This is their founder, but we were able to get some salvage out of them. Tower of the Sun. Looking into Canada, you get those multicolored discs overhead. Canada was well received. The movies were very popular and got good attendance. Quebec. Again, Australia holding up the roof from up above. This was pretty bad, damaged. I made a note of it. Gas Pavilion. Toshiba, again, it always struck me as a sort of spider-looking type creature, but use the metal lattice framework, and you can hold up your dome from inside. So again, suspended ceilings were a big thing. One of the Expo signboards with the Expo logo, and then the which basically is the same. If you remember, there were 5 Japan discs for the Japanese pavilion and a central tower represented here in the Expo logo. And they didn't have digital clocks, they had analog clocks, but you could easily tell your time. There was a giant digital clock, and we'll see some more shots of it, that was used for counting down to special events. The Electric Pavilion, Burma, 2 giant dragons on either side of it. Hitachi, one of the main industrial pavilions. Looking way, way up at Russia. Czechoslovakia had had a number of successful pavilions at fairs, including a super successful one at Expo 67. The one at Expo 70 was not as large and grand pavilion. I think they'd blown the budget for Expo 67, but again, well received. And you can see the lines waiting to go in for it. Just some general view of the grounds. No idea what the big red ball is. Maybe Randy Lopes, who was there a number of times, can tell us what the giant red ball was. We'll take another look. Some more souvenir slides here. This is a real quick batch. Again, the Tower of the Sun. This is again out at the fountains. They're turned off here now, but this gave you an idea how they work. The water would be pumped up the center pole into the box areas at the top of the fountains, and then the water would come crashing back down. Canada at night. The mirrored surface of it gave a very nice reflection to the flags and everything else around it. Quebec's pavilion, again, a construction shot. Expo Tower. People are commenting about Expo Tower being an inspiration for Douglas Trumbull. If you remember the movie Silent Running, they have a ship called the Valley Forge, and it's out in space carrying the remnants of Earth's forests and gardens out into space, and it was large domes out on the end of a giant boom. Well, Douglas Trumbull has been quoted as saying that Expo Tower gave him that idea, that the central shaft of the spaceship and then these domes that were up across it. There's another pavilion, which I think we'll see today, which I probably also influenced him. Have a nice sunset view. Switzerland, obviously very popular. They had lights out on all those metal work to give it the view. Nice time-lapse view of traffic going by. Hong Kong, they made a point that this was a British protectorate at the time, appeasing the Chinese government, that it was not the Chinese pavilion or anything. I don't remember if Taiwan had a pavilion or not, but they made a point of how this was a British protectorate and not an independent nation at the time. Gas pavilion. Okay, we'll go grab some others. I actually have some publicity photos that people might want to see, because they do show a lot of the hostesses in their costumes. So these are in black and white. We'll jump into this folder for a second. But I mentioned they had a digital clock. This was January 28th, 1970. I don't know what they were particularly counting down to at this point in time, but you can see up there, January 28th, 3:11 in the afternoon. And they've just pulled a banner off announcing something that is yet to come. We're going to get some nice aerial views. There's both a mixture in these pictures of open Expo and Expo under construction. But this gives you a good idea of how big it was. As I mentioned, 820 acres. It was not an inconsequential pocket-sized park like maybe Expo 74 was, or others. It took quite an amount of time to get around the whole site. But you can see it was pretty well self-encapsulated, a little bit of a green belt, Expo land, and then the Osaka itself not far off to the side. Again, nice view. The U.S. pavilion, the big disc off here, off to the side. And it's kind of interesting, the Cold War kind of spelled out the USA on one side, and as far away as you can get the USSR pavilion, the flattest pavilion you could possibly get, and the tallest pavilion you could possibly get. So just kind of interesting how they were separated like that. We'll just keep flipping through some of these views, and we'll get into here some of the hostesses. Each of the countries went, just like Expo 67, went way out of the way to come up with spiffy, modern-looking designs. biggest emphasis on hostesses as opposed to hosts. So lots of shots of different women in the costumes. Down below, you can see the Dream Pond, the pole sticking up for the fountains that we're going to see cascading down. Expo Land up at the top of it. USSR, the water is now in the stream. Inside the USSR, again, space was a big issue, and the fellow up on the giant picture, Yuri Gagarin, their first big hero in space. You know, we had Alan Shepard, they had Gagarin, a big tribute to him. And down below, again, the Soyuz capsules we saw earlier, and all sorts of their moon landers and other satellites. More aerial views. Expo Land down here on the right. Giant dome shaped theater. What was nice, again, by doing all these buildings with suspended roofs, you could put these theaters together, lean rails, which are not uncommon if you've been to the Disney movies, the Circle Vision things. They always, give you a lean rail to go on, because as the camera moves quickly, it induces vertigo, and people like to have those to lean on. Mentioned earlier, signage, English and Japanese. They had made a big use of pictographs, which had been a major implementation for Expo 67 for things like ladies' room, men's room, information and that. So they put those out all throughout the site, helping people to get around. Lots of construction still going on, lots of cranes all over the place. And again, a good idea of the tower's sun, the size of it. Sometimes the pictures are absolutely just cram-packed with people, and you can't even see the ground for all the people. United Nations was there, monorail going past it. Panama, very modern looking, sort of a small pavilion, but still great that they participated. We get Thailand. Construction again, the moving sidewalk being put underway, lots of scaffolding. Train system being put in place. Again, mentioned you could come out here by a train, bus, or car. And as I said earlier, you had nations you generally don't see exhibiting at World's Fairs. And it's interesting how, if you could reconstruct why particular countries decided it was worth the money for this one and not other ones. But that, again, kind of makes it fun. If everybody was at every World's Fair, it wouldn't make it exciting. But if you go to this one and you may never see them again, it's a good reason to go. This was the pavilion done by the All Japan Buddhist Association. Very traditional architecture. Nigeria. Monorails going around. They're just getting ready to plant the grounds here. This is Sumitomo Pavilion. I think we'll dive back into some color. Black and white does. It's interesting when it picks up, but it can get to be boring after a while. We're going to take a look at another rack set here with nice views of the Expo Tower coming up. So Great Britain with their giant Union Jack, moving sidewalks, which they had to make sure, by the way, conceal that glass. They had to make sure that they air conditioned those tunnels to get them in there. Skyway, the Sky Train system tower for it there. Netherlands just with the orange stripe. Kind of a nighttime view. Again, this was the Fairy Tale Theater. I'm not quite sure what one they're walking on here with the undulating hills and that. Just looking down at the Fairy Tale Theater, and this is going up to it. Fuji, kind of interesting again. Thinking how many fans it took to keep these things inflated for the life of it. Here's the Expo Tower again. I've got a lot of other shots. You could actually ride up the elevator into these domes up there and go out, take pictures that you get some nice view shots. Some of it faced right over towards the tower, the sun, and the theme structure, so you can get some very nice view. But again, if you think about the movie Silent Running with the gardens of the earth stuck inside domes, this is the inspiration for it. And here is the same tower in a very foggy day out there. Sort of a different look to it. Now we'll just grab a couple more here. Let's see. I don't think I've done these. So Festival Plaza, the area underneath the roof there, as I mentioned earlier, giant crowds all packed in there. People wanting to go and see the inside the tower, you can get the exhibits. Down below, covered walkways. You both had moving sidewalks, but also you had regular sidewalks. But because of heat and that, they put covers over them, which was a nice idea. State of Washington had a pavilion, a good sized one. It's kind of interesting trying to figure out why different states do it. Well, if you go back to the 1962 World's Fair, one of the things that they had there was a lot of the Pacific nations exhibiting over at the 62 fair on why you would want to do business with them. In the state of Washington doing the same thing. Hey, we're one of the closest United States to the Japan. So if you're thinking about importing stuff, you ought to bring it through Washington. If you're exporting stuff, you ought to send it through Washington. And we also have some really neat industries and businesses that you might want to deal with as well. So made much more sense for the state of Washington than say the state of New York to have a pavilion at the Expo 70. Down below, a little booth down there, you can go and get some French food. Lots of crowds. You can see the sign in the background is in Japanese, the electronic sign in this particular one. The digital clock we saw earlier is off to the left. Off to the left-hand side, I forget which one of the Islamic pavilions it was off the top of my head. I'm sorry, it slips my mind at the moment. And here you had cosmetic display, so you could come in and get the latest makeup and find out where a dealer was close to you. This one, by the way, there's two views of this. This is where sometimes you have to use Photoshop to help things. The person that took this picture back then didn't quite hold the camera right, so it looks like the pavilion is falling over its side, but we can fix it and put it back into proper perspective. Moving sidewalk in front of it, mentioned gardens down below. So some nice spots of color in that going across the grounds. Again, the Tower of Youth off here to the side, and the Tower of the Sun in the center. In the background, this is kind of interesting. It was called a vertical Ferris wheel. So you get in these cabins, they would rise you up, you'd go across the top and come back down. So it was just like a Ferris wheel, but instead of going in a circle, you went in a rectangle. Just something sort of different. And people just relaxing, as I mentioned, whoops, you could go and buy boxes of food, take them out, sit on the benches, enjoy your time out there. Lots of gardens and flowers, as I mentioned. What's interesting here is if you look over to the right of the men, there's one of the lights for the facility. Just like with Expo 67, they had not gone with giant light towers like we the luminaries that we all like so much for the New York World's Fair. Expo 70 had much more ground lighting. You didn't have the big towers sticking up or blocking your view. So it gave much clearer sight lines and pleasant views for it. And I think we'll grab into one more batch of pictures here. Let's see, which ones will we do? Okay, so we'll jump in here. So we have over here in the very front Bulgaria, the Green Mountain type of area. I mentioned a country that is not at a lot of World's Fairs, but had a nice pavilion here. And their ideologically related neighbor, the USSR, in the background. Burma, very tall, towering pavilion. Furukawa Tower, I think, too. Midori Kan, another Japanese industrial pavilion. You start seeing how long the lines became for some of the pavilions. Again, with 64 million people, the lines were not uncommon, but they were moved well, and Japanese being an orderly people, the crowds were well behaved. Get some more general views as we walk around the electric pavilion. Riding on the Sky Ride, taking a trip across the grounds. They gave you some nice views. Again, Netherlands stuck out, being right on the route. Argentina, nice colorful graphics on the side there. One of the lakes. It's interesting how industrial these towers look. They really look like high tension towers, don't they? Surprised they didn't come up with something a little bit more artistic. We had seen a little bit of Malaysia before, just a side view. This helps give you an idea of just how big the whole pavilion was. Long exhibit hall with those traditional style buildings up on the roof, and a Malaysian restaurant that you can come and eat at as well. British Columbia, again, we had seen the backside of the tower going. We had seen a front-on view of the rocky area in the front, but the side view gives you a nice, interesting view of the depth of it. You can also see over here a mountain and a man-made waterfall coming down, and more water feature down below. So they were making a big focus on the natural wonders of British Columbia, that we have all this wood and stone and water, and we'd be glad to find some use for it if you'd care to talk to us about it. More Switzerland, one of the more photographed pavilions because it was just so different. Looking at again towards the lake, mentioned before the giant blocks that the water would race up and come pouring down. Folks on their way to see the USA Pavilion. And let's do just one more shot of one more set of pictures. Okay. Some more souvenir shots. These were the traditional Panaview ones that had turned bright red that had to be restored. Textile pavilion. France had these multiple domes here. When we saw them under construction, they had giant word France on them. Well, again, all that temporary signage taken down. By now, everybody knows which one this is. Oops. And Festival Plaza, again, where the tower was, you could clear out the crowds and have these huge performances here. So you had dance troops, you had all sorts of bands performing different musical acts. Nice view of the Electric Power Pavilion at night. Views of the lake out here. This is the Pond of Dreams. And again, last time we saw this pavilion at night, it was mostly blue, the Japanese pavilion in the back, but they could constantly change the the colors on it for different tones. Hong Kong had paid homage to the traditional junks, so you had all the flags and both the ones here and in the center, giving a stylized look at it. Down below, restaurants and exhibits. Vietnam, I can't recall too many other pavilions that had Vietnam pavilions in them. We're now in Expo Tower inside of one of those modules hanging off the side. You can get a nice view off towards the main fair. This is inside the gas pavilion. If you do not, you can probably read the caption, but if you're not sure, that is called Innocent Laughter. And I never know how they come up with the names for these sort of things. I actually have to remember to go online and see if this has survived anywhere, this mural. It's kind of interesting. The Korea Pavilion. Again, not North Korea, not South Korea, but Korea, because at that time, North Korea just did not exist to the people of Japan. So you only had the Korea Pavilion. Just like we had at the '64 World's Fair, you had Korea, you didn't have South Korea. Kind of nice, colorful shot here of the entrance into Canada with all the flags of the Canadian provinces off to the right. This is inside the Tower of Life. If we remember the mention in the movie that you could go and see inside what made up life. So here you're getting a lecture. We're in the sea here, so you have jellyfish, you have sharks, you have other things, all that making up life in the sea, because they made sure that you understood that life wasn't just mankind, it was all sorts of the animals and some of them microscopic you can't even see. And talking again, as I mentioned at the very beginning, how ecology was becoming an interest and that people were realizing that we're all in it together. Furukawa Tower, Toshiba. I don't know if anybody else sees a spider in it, but every time I see it, I see a giant spider. This is a time capsule, kind of interesting. They actually did two of them. They were absolutely identical. Big metal ball here, and they've taken the time capsule, and the idea is that they took two of them, buried in the shaft outside of Osaka Castle. The one at the bottom of the shaft is to stay there for 5,000 years. And the one that's above it is to be opened every 100 years. So I think the first time it was supposed to be open was the year 2000, and then every 100 years or so after that. So they are, hermetically sealed. They went through a whole bunch of things of trying to figure out what textiles and rubber and what the impact of that would be, and if they did deteriorate, how do they keep it from leaching into other materials. But they, as I mentioned, they made two absolutely identical one of these. It'd be kind of interesting if they had done that with the Westinghouse time capsules, pop them up every 100 years and remind people it's down there, and then leave the big one down below. But this was, again, a big display, not as impressive as, I think it sort of looks like a giant stew pot, but the two of them are in a shaft outside of Osaka Castle, and we only have about 80 something years until it will be opened up again. I'm really looking forward to being there to see it, so I hope everybody else is too. Hostesses from Indonesia. More of the theme structure. Back to the USSR. Sounds like a Beatles song. Again, suspend your building by steel frameworks on the outside, or make it inflatable and have lots of exhibit space. So kind of interesting. Here's the roller coaster I mentioned. It was actually, by the way, interesting. Expo Land did stay open for a number of years after Expo 70 closed. It remained open as a theme park, and like others, just like the La Ronde up in Montreal, they modernized the rides. In 2007, they had a different roller coaster, which was a vertical standing roller coaster, and they had, unfortunately, a fatal accident on it. One person killed, quite a few people injured, and they did a major investigation, found out that they had not done a safety check on it in 17 years. So they did an emergency halt of all those sort of roller coasters across Japan. The one at Expo Land, they found the second one was damaged. They fixed that. But again, in December of that year, they had yet another derailing. So Expo Land closed in 2007 with plans to finally fix all the things that had broken and worn out. But in 2009, they decided that it had run its life and it had not reopened, so it was torn down. They did get a massive fine for what they did, but it was kind of amazing knowing how orderly Japan is that they somehow skipped ride inspections for 17 years. Sound is getting better and worse. Okay, I'm almost done. It's probably the air conditioning coming on. So let me just turn off the air conditioner. 1 second here. And again, US Pavilion. Since I am going to run out of time, let me just stop sharing this one's for a second, and let's take a look at how the site looked in later years. So we're going to go back and visit Expo 70 site, and we're going to do it in October 1985. So it's still a park. It's still a very popular area to go out to and visit. At this point in time, again, Expo Land is still open. It's not now. But the metal framework around the Tower of the Sun was taken down. But the tower has stayed and is still visible. You can see them on Google Maps and that sort of thing. So very popular spot, school groups going out, and he's still standing out there. I don't know if they still light them up at night or not. When I look at this picture, I always feel kind of sorry for the guy. You know, he's out there waiting for the crowds, you know, that he had in his heyday in Expo 70. But it is kind of nice that it has survived. You know, so many theme structures of different fairs have not. I don't know if the interior is open or not these days, but it's still standing out there and visible. Expo Land was still open at the time. This picture was taken from Expo Tower. You can see, you know, lots of the grounds here have been removed and returned to nature. So this used to be all full of different pavilions and that. That very same bus parking lot that we've seen in the movie and other shots is found here, and still being a popular spot to come in, you know, into the grounds. And again, the U.S. pavilion was right around here. U.S. SAR was back here, but they've made it this very nice open green space. Considering how built up things are in the background, you can imagine how nice and welcome the green space, you know, being kept. Mentioned during the talk how they had kept some of the pavilions, so you can see Expo Hall and the Expo Museum out there, so that again they could use them for performances, art exhibits, and cultural displays, bands, that sort of thing. Looking out from the Expo Tower across the ground, and he's still standing up there waiting for us to come back and visit him today. So let me stop the share at that point, and then I will see how many different things I got right or wrong, or questions that came up. So let's see, I'm going up to the beginning here. Joey Vento, this looks like your kind of movie. Yeah, I'm sure that it was. You know, if you ever get a chance to watch that movie, it's really bizarre because the turtle flies, but he flies with two giant jets of flame that come out of him. So it's like, you know, okay, I might be willing to dispel belief if he just flew, but I'm still trying to figure out where the giant flames came from. Other than that, he ate a lot of beans before reflight or something. I don't know. So let's see. Randy Lopes, the designer, also designed the 64 Tokyo Olympic facilities. Thank you. All these buildings, how I want Epcot to look like. Yeah, it would really be really nice. The trouble is, you know, this World's Fair, you could build for 6 months. Epcot, you had to build to last for, you know, 20, 30, 40 years. So, you know, that's one of the things you have to take into account. You know, if you build it, you got to maintain it. And then, yeah, Beth was mentioning it'd be nice if World Showcase was a true World's Fair concept. And it really was. During the time that Carol and I worked at, there were all the plans for the German Rhine River cruise. Japan was supposed to have the Meet the World show. We had all sorts of mock-ups for things like, you know, African nations and that. So, you know, now today, everything's got to be a thrill ride. Okay. Yeah, Japan guide about 30 to 50 minutes north of central Osaka. Matter of fact, Floyd, you mentioned there's going to be another World's Fair in Osaka on 2025, and it's not on the same site. So they're not pulling the New York trick and reusing the same fairgrounds and that. They're building a whole new site for the new fair. Just going through these real quick, and I see we have one hand up, which I'm doing in just a few seconds. Saudi Arabia. Okay, thank you, Randy. That was the nation I couldn't remember there. Oh, and Don Lancaster. Innocent Laughter is now on permanent display in the National Museum of Art in Osaka. Well, thank you for saving me the time. Appreciate it. What U.S. states participated? Oh, good question. Obviously Washington, and I'm trying to remember. Randy, do you remember what the other U.S. states were?
Washington for sure, the city of San Francisco. Alaska had something in something called American Park, which was next to the US Pavilion.
Right next door.
Yeah, it had some, like, I think Encyclopedia Britannica had an exhibit there. It was mostly US commercial entities, but Alaska had an exhibit there. God, I can't remember if there are any others. Washington, I think that's it.
Yeah, my guidebook's upstairs. I should have had it sitting here.
Yeah, mine is too, yeah.
Yuko and Dennis, you had a question, so if you could unmute yourself there, or comment, question, whatever you'd like.
Actually, it's a rather strange human interest story, and you may already know it, I think. I know Carol does. But I attended on Saturday, August 21st, and the only thing I recall is that date. Thank you for showing me what I obviously have no memory of whatsoever. The reason I think that I have no memory is what happened on Friday, the day before, when I met a beautiful young Japanese girl. And I think that occupied my mind. I asked her to attend the expo with me. Oh, incidentally, I had a VIP type of pass as well. I asked her to attend with me, but she had a class reunion instead. But it all worked out on Sunday, because on Sunday we set our wedding date, because on Friday, the day we met, 4.5 hours later, we were engaged. But
Wow.
aside from that, I had my total loss of any memory of that fair, because I was completely, I think, engrossed with thinking about her. And I think she's about to join me.
That's really wonderful.
There she is.
Hi.
You know, I like to joke. People ask me about, of all my Disney collection, what's my best souvenir? And I said, well, it's Carol, because I met her at Disney. But you've gone better. You've got a great, semi-World's Fair connection there that I can understand why the rest of the fair would be more. Goodness gracious.
It was a total, I just have zero recall of anything that you showed me. And of course, I had to have known it, but I was thinking of just she, I guess thinking of her.
Also, I attended on my own with my American friend who visiting me in Japan at the time. And we spent from early morning to late at night, all day long. And we were just totally exhausted, but we were just awed.
I was there from early morning until virtually ending, so, but no memory.
Oh, wow. What were your favorite pavilions or shows out there?
That's you go. I have no memory.
I think American was very, very popular, and it has a long line to get in. And so I think that was something that I remember, that we got in line and wanted to get in. And also, beside all the pavilions, I remember eating pancake with apple slices from some European country. I think that's some Scandinavian country. I think that was their food that they served. So all Japanese loved it.
Oh,
Pancake with slice of apples, which was new to us.
Did you guys take any pictures out there?
I took a lot of them, and I'm sure you did.
Yeah, I have lots of pictures. I have no idea where they are.
Those are all slides. Dennis was taking slides at the time.
Slides and movies.
Well, since you're just down the road from us, if you ever find them and you want them scanned, just let me know, and Carol and I can meet you, and I'll be glad to scan them and preserve them for you.
Well,
Okay.
I was just writing to Carol about getting together for a meal again.
If it's safe.
Yeah.
We're vaccinated.
My bad, I didn't get back to you, Dennis. I'm sorry. I meant to. And we're trying to figure out the dates and all that, but we would like to.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, we'll work something out. That'd be super. Greg Aribar mentions he met his wife working at Disney as well. Hundreds of marriages happen at Disney. Yeah, it's a great spot to meet somebody with a kindred spirit. So no doubt about it. Well, great, Dennis and Hugo. Thanks for sharing it. I hope some of it, Dennis, was came out of the blur there, but kind of funny that August was the time, huh?
Well, the only reason I know the date that I was there is because I know the date that we became engaged. And incidentally, as I told Carol, 2 months ago, actually 2 months and 2 days ago, we celebrated the 50th year of our honeymoon.
Wow. That's crazy. Well, thank you.
Sure.
Trish, you have your hand up?
Yes, I was curious about when you were talking about the Washington State Pavilion and why they participated at Expo 70. Was there any reasoning for that was tied to them hosting in Spokane 4 years later?
I don't know. That's interesting. Chris had sent me something earlier today. Chris is a real expert on Hemisphere 68, and I've been trying to twist his arm and get him to do a presentation. So I'm almost there. So everybody that wants Chris to do a presentation on the Hemisphere, raise your hand.
I'll still take a look at it.
Yeah, so he sent me brochures that they did a presentation of a movie at Hemisphere showing what was coming up at Expo 70, and I was putting into in my email. It'd be wonderful if that film could ever be found again. But yeah, it's been very traditional that the people that are having a World's Fair will do an exhibit at the next World's Fair or at the prior World's Fair to try to get to come in there. From what I have found though about the Expo, the 70 Pavilion for Washington, there was a little mention of Spokane coming up, but there's mostly about the rest of the state and the industrial and natural resources that they might want to do. A big part of it though is the port of entry. That we have these tremendous ports, both shipping and SeaTac and all the rest of it. So if you're going to get your stuff into the United States, you can bring it in cheaper through Washington than if you went someplace else. So again, I hope we can convince Chris. Chris gave us a wonderful in-person tour of Hemisphere, the site a few years ago. So we thank you again for that.
Thank you.
Brandy?
Yeah, I can't figure out how to do that hand icon. Anyway, hey, Chris, it's nice to see you. We're friends on Facebook.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm the one that posts all the cat pictures. Anyway, I have several things to say if you have a minute. I did attend Expo 70. And actually, I was there at the same time as Dennis. He said he was there August 21st. I was there that day. I kind of wrote down a list here of things. Let's see. The Expo Tower was really not a tower in the same sense as the Tower of the Americas at Hemisphere or the Space Needle at Seattle. It was a communications tower, and those modules were added. The theory was that they could build a skyscraper by putting up those 3 pylons, let's say 300-foot, 400-foot pylons, and then attaching those modules to those pylons. Each one could be an apartment or a room in an apartment, an office, whatever. And same thing with that Takara Butillion. It was a small scale representation of, they could build a large space frame, put in these square modules, each one being a room. As the pavilion was set up, each of those modules contained part of an exhibit of makeup or cosmetics or whatever. So they were a cosmetics firm. So that was kind of the intent of those 2 buildings.
The one with the modules, that should be sort of like their version of Habitat then, right?
Oh yeah, exactly. I meant to say that. Yeah, exactly. The Ferris wheel things that you said, there were about 6 or 7 of them, maybe more, around the grounds. The thing is that you couldn't just get on there. Obviously, you would think you'd pay admission, but you didn't. You had to buy a lunch, and you sat in this cube and ate your lunch. The one that I went in sold, I can't remember. It was one that sold fried chicken, and they all sold different things. But that was your entry, was to buy the lunch, then you sit there and you consume part of your lunch and then get off and finish it, off the ride. But did give really good views of the fair. Panama that you showed was, there were several small groupings of pavilions that were built by the Expo Corporation for smaller countries. And they were called, I think Expo Place is what they were called. I think there were 3 or 4 of them. And within them, and they were all slightly different in architecture, but they were definitely like modular. And they were, like Monaco had an exhibit in one of them, I remember, Uruguay, smaller countries. And then also the African countries that you pointed out, the only African country that really had an individual or standalone pavilion was Ivory Coast. The others they were kind of standalone, but they were part of something similar to Expo 67, an African place. I'm not sure if they were built by the Expo Corporation or if it just a plot of land where they could come in and build a smaller pavilion, but they were all distinct from one another, unlike at Expo 67. So they gave you a chance, and the plaza that was in the middle of all the buildings was a great place to see, African dances and that kind of stuff. The steel pavilion is still there, and it houses. I haven't seen it, but from what I communicate with Japanese friends who are Expo 70 buffs, houses an incredible Expo 70 museum. Something that's too bad that Montreal can't do, because they've got a couple buildings sitting there that are in ruins, basically. It'd be great if every World's Fair could do that. The Australian pavilion actually was moved after the fair to a sister city in Japan. There was a sister city of Sydney or another city in Australia. It survived till about maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and it was torn down. It fell into disrepair. I'm not sure what it was used for, but then there was actually a move to try to save it, but it was unsuccessful. As you mentioned, it was very, very crowded, very crowded. I would not have seen the US or USSR pavilions had I not kind of run into luck. The US pavilion, I had read that it was a myth that you could show your passport, they'd let you in right away. If you could prove you were a US citizen, that was not the case. But as I had approached, it was a side door to the pavilion where the staff entered. They had a complete beneath, the exhibit hall, the exhibit area was underground, but even beneath that, there were offices for the staff. And they entered through a side door. And I was kind of standing there, and I started talking to this young lady, very pretty young lady, about probably in her mid-20s. Well, as it turned out, she was a secretary for the pavilion. She had gone out to have a cigarette and was going back in. She said, "Follow me." So I followed her. She said, "Walk down this hallway. At the end of the hallway to the left, there's a door. You'll be right at the entrance to the pavilion, but just inside." So that's how I saw that. Otherwise, I would not have seen it. There was about a 5 to 6 hour wait for it. Same thing for USSR, about a 5 to 6 hour wait. I had lunch at, I think Dennis's wife mentioned the pancakes. Yeah, the Scandinavian pavilion. I had lunch there, and I happened to share a table with a woman who was the wife of an Israeli diplomat who had some kind of a VIP pass. And her next pavilion was going to be USSR. And she said, "Do you want to come with me?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd love it, because otherwise I'm not going to see it." So I was able to just walk right in with her and see it. So that was great. I would not have seen those 2 exhibits. It would have taken, a full day just to see those 2 buildings. The France pavilion, which is kind of blah looking, those white domes. Initially, it was supposed to have been glass enclosed domes, but they ran into some construction problems, so they ended up just covering them up in some kind of a white fiberglass or some other material. So it wasn't the most exciting looking building, certainly not as exciting as the French pavilion at Expo 67. Taiwan was there. They had a very nice pavilion right next to Korea, and it was designed by I.M. Pei, one of his first works, and it looks very much like his other work, very angular. He's also designed the Kennedy Library in Boston, and also I think it's the modern art wing of the National Gallery in DC, and other buildings. But very nice building, very angular. Like I say, that's very representative of his work. Let's see. The USSR and US, like you said, the US pavilion was flat, USSR towered, a couple hundred feet at least. But between the two, the US pavilion actually got the accolades because it actually represented architecture that could be used elsewhere. And it was used for a while, and there were some stadiums. In fact, the town where I grew up, Santa Clara, by San Jose, University of Santa Clara, at one time had a air-supported dome stadium like that. Small stadium, not that large, but eventually they tore it down. It was too expensive to operate. You had to have those fans running consistently, and they eventually tore it down, but or either converted it to open air. But those are, some of my memories. I spent 5 days there. I'd say I saw probably maybe 60% of the pavilions, maybe not even that much. Mitsubishi, which you didn't have an individual picture of, but it was a very large pavilion. It's kind of the GM pavilion of Expo 70. Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, which I guess they build the cars and whatever else. I'm not sure what as a corporation they build. Had kind of it wasn't really a ride through, but they had a series of moving sidewalks that took you through the exhibit. So there was always a long line, but it moved quickly because you really couldn't stop. You just got on these moving sidewalks and you were taken through whatever speed they were set at. But it was great. It had a lot of things similar to GM Futurama, cities of the future, underwater cities, that kind of stuff that I guess Mitsubishi figured they would be involved in building. That's about it. Like I say, it was just very crowded. I stayed in Kyoto. I spent 3 days from Kyoto, and then 2 days from Osaka. From Osaka was really easy. It dropped you off right in the middle of the fairgrounds. The freeway that you showed with the time exposure, always reminds me of like the Grand Central Parkway, the New York World's Fair, going right through the site. That was actually considered the main entrance, and you just got off the train, went up a set of escalators, and entered. I don't remember ever waiting to enter the fair. It seemed like you just kind of got right in. There were, I think, about 5 or 6 gates. When I came from Kyoto, I was at, I think it was the East Gate, right next to the Japan Pavilion, their national pavilion. But I don't remember ever waiting. I mean, I bought my ticket. I didn't have it in advance. I bought my ticket, presented it at the turnstile and walked right in. Of course, then you hit a wall because there were people just backed up everywhere. But I'm glad I went. It's the last World's Fair that had the Cold War rivalry of the US and USSR, to at least to the extent that we saw, these huge, huge pavilions, which we saw in Brussels and we saw in Montreal. And probably the last style, and then just tear it down. I mean, nowadays, if you look even like at Expo 92 in Seville, which I was able to attend, I'd say about 70% of the buildings are still there. Some are not being used, they're in pretty bad shape, but some are being used, and some were obviously intended for post-fair use. I think Expo 2010 in Shanghai, which I attended, I think most of it's gone. I know they kept up a couple of popular exhibits, Saudi Arabia, which we waited like 5.5 hours to get into. And we were there early. We went the first week. And let me tell you, you talked about the Chinese government giving free passes to everybody to go. It's basically saying you're going to go. They were in a panic because they were only getting about 200,000 to 300,000 a day the first week. And I was able to talk to, it was an American guy who was actually with the Saudi Arabian pavilion, but he worked for OPEC. And he was saying that they had a meeting like the day before, and they were in a panic. It was like if they did not get higher attendance, they were only going to get maybe 40, 50 million at most. But like you say, they bust people in. Basically, you're going, you have no choice, and they got their 70, whatever it was.
Yeah, imagine the mayor of your town calling a town meeting, everybody there, and you're all getting on buses tomorrow to go to the World's Fair. And if you don't, you know,
Yeah. Yeah, I think what they did a lot in a lot of instances was they went to a particular factory and said, "Hey, factory's closed tomorrow. We're all taking a field trip,
yeah,
and you have to go." Yeah.
crazy.
So anyway, if anybody has any questions about the pictures that Bill showed, I can try to answer them. My memory's starting to fade on some of these things, but it was such an impressive event. It's a lot of it has stuck with me. There's more than I can say about a lot of things that happened to me in 1970.
Yeah. Yeah, Randy, if you ever get a chance, if you'd like to show us more of Shanghai, you know, love to go and spend any time, you know, doing that.
Yeah, I have a fair number of pictures. Yeah, it was definitely something worth attending. A lot of interesting things to see. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention about Expo 70 when I was there. There were a lot of people from rural areas of Japan that attended. And I've been warned about this in advance that young girls are going to walk up and ask for your autograph. And I'm like, well, why? It's like, because they've never seen Americans. Maybe never even seen Caucasians in person. They've lived in these little villages forever. And sure enough, I had, young schoolgirls come up, they want to take a picture with me. Also, I'm 6 feet tall, which is not that tall, but I was taller than most of the people, on the site. I remember getting into the subway in Tokyo where they pack you in with those, you've seen pictures.
Yeah.
And thank God I was a foot taller than everybody else. I would have been, suffocating in there. But yeah, I was amazed when young girls came up, we want your autograph. They'd say it in their broken English and take a picture with them. And, it was fun.
I had a guy working for me, Bob Mayer was his name, and he was about 6'2", from UK, very big guy. His hair was so blonde it was almost white. And we were at Tokyo Disneyland, and all the same sort of thing you were talking about. All these tour guides tour girls were coming around laughing and giggling and pointing at him and everything. He was feeling very self-conscious.
Yeah.
And he says, "What are they talking about?" I said, "Well, I know a little Japanese, and they're talking about trying to figure out if they can make a scaling of the North Summit to get to your head." All day long, he just wanted to get out of there because he just towered above everybody, and I'm much shorter than that, so I had dark hair then, so I blended in. But boy, poor Bob was like, for the rest of the trip, we just kept calling him Gulliver.
Yeah, luckily I'd been warned. The first 3 days I traveled to the fair from Kyoto. I was staying in a smaller hotel in Kyoto, not Japanese style. Back then, you could still stay in Japanese style hotels, like you probably still can, where you sleep on the mats. Can't remember, there were names for the hotels and the mats and all that. I don't remember, but I was staying in a Western style hotel, but a smaller one, not a big chain or anything. But the concierge, as I was leaving, getting on the bus to go to the train station to get to Expo, had warned me, "You're gonna get thronged." Sure enough, I did. Yeah. So,
That's funny.
yeah.
Thanks for the memories. Kathy Gregory, you said your husband would like to share his thoughts. And if he was there on the same day in August, I'm going to start figuring that was like a cosmic nexus. So Kathy, if you can unmute yourself.
There we go.
Okay.
Are we muted?
Are we
Hi.
unmuted?
Are we unmuted? Can you, Bill, this is John Gregory.
Yeah, hi, John.
Hi, great presentation. The slides and the narrative was terrific. And appreciate Dennis's comments and Randy's comments. I have to share a lot of Dennis's sentiments because although I was there several days, I don't really have recollection of a lot of details. And I don't know where my many slides are. Maybe someday I'll find them. Anyway, I was with the Army and stationed in Japan for a year and a half. So I was in Japan when Expo 70 was in progress. And I did go, had a lot of good fortune to go. And one of the things, and I also went to Expo 67 in Montreal, and of course, coming from New Jersey, I went to the 64, 65 in New York. And one of the things I really felt regarding Expo 67 and Expo 70 was that it was really a national fair. The Canadians and the Japanese were very proud nationally of having this fair, whereas in New York it was, you know, it was like New York dominated. And of course, Robert Moses was around at the time. Um, so that I think there was a sense of a difference of pride, especially between Japan and Expo 67. The and two things I kind of remember. I did get a chance to see the back of Prince Charles when he visited the Netherlands pavilion. They had pretty much emptied out the pavilion for security reasons, but somehow I guess they didn't think the Gaijins, the foreigners, were a threat. So I got to stay and got to see a quick glimpse of him. One other thing, which is very, you know, again, I was in Japan a year and a half, really impressed with the country and the people. They do things very efficiently. At one point in the fair, there was one of the excuse me, one of the visitors had tripped and fell, and she fell on the pavement and kind of broke her teeth and stuff, and there was some blood on the sidewalk. But right nearby was like a little police kiosk, and basically the kiosk just had inside, it just had basically a button on a desk. So the police officer went and looked outside and saw what happened. He walked back in, he pressed the button. Within about a minute, a little tiny ambulance drives up, scooped up the person. Right away, a maintenance crew was right there cleaning up the little bit of blood that was on the sidewalk. It's very efficiently done. It's very, very characteristic of how the Japanese do things.
Do you remember the crowds that they're talking about?
Yeah, you know, I don't, you know, again, I went through the one in New York, and so crowds I expected. So it's not like I could recall the crowds being an issue in my mind. I did get to see the U.S. pavilion and the Russian pavilion. I guess that I had the patience and the time to be able to wait the number of hours to see it. And you know, and appreciate Randy. Randy provided a lot of details. Really a great job. Filled in, you know, a lot of things I didn't remember. So that's about my recollection of it. And again, thanks for doing this, Bill. As always, thanks for doing this series of programs overall this year and a half.
My pleasure. You know, I've mentioned before, I thought this would go for a month or 2 months, and then the pandemic would be over. Now I'm looking at a whole new wave of it coming, figuring, oh my God, what do we do now? So, you know, I think appreciate for the folks that shared the memories. Back in 1970, I was a starving college student who was more worried about where my next beer was going to come from. So I did not make it to Expo 70, which is one of the reasons I had put this off later. You know, I can only share historical research, and I do appreciate the comments from the folks who are at, excuse me, actually there. Sorry, I'm getting all choked up.
While you're drinking your water, yeah, one thing that was just mentioned about Expo 67 and Expo 70 and the national pride in them as opposed to New York. Expo 70 in Japan now is, I mean, it's legendary. When I was working for Delta as flight attendant, I had a couple of pins that I had from Expo 70. I remember one was from the USSR pavilion and one was, I think, just the logo, whatever, that I wear on my serving apron. And we'd have Japanese passengers. They say, "Oh, Expo 70," and I say, "I went," and they'd be amazed that I went. And it's just, I mean, there are entire stores in Osaka devoted to Expo 70 memorabilia. So it's really considered a legend with great memories. Yeah.
Yeah, as I mentioned, you know, they had the biggest attendance of any World's Fair until the, you know, Chinese rigged the game. So that I think it's an amazing testimonial to it. In one of my books about Expo 67, I mentioned about how if there was ever a city that embraced the World's Fair, it was Montreal. You know, New York, you know, had a love-hate relationship. You know, same with Seattle. A bunch of them, you're destroying parts of this to do that, whatever. You know, Montreal pretty much was like, wow, let's have a big ass party and invite the world. You know, it's our 100th birthday. And I think the energy really felt that way. I mean, I'm sure that like everything else, there's somebody not happy because all the best restaurants are full by tourists or the hotels or whatever. But you could really feel the difference in energy between some of the events where the World's Fair was welcomed as opposed to accepted. The huge difference between the two. So makes for a big thing. There were some other comments here. Greg Airbar mentioned that there was an Archie comic where they went to the World's Expo 70, and Veronica came back not remembering anything about it, but the smart, the more sane one, Betty, had read up a lot, so she was a fountain of knowledge. So amazing. When I came across that movie bit of them going out there, I was really astonished. Basically the whole plot of the movie is the monsters are going to destroy Expo 70. I hope Gamera can come back and save it. Joey mentioned in the chat he saw that on a double billing with Wuthering Heights. I mean, that to me is like putting Bambi together with Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I mean, I can imagine putting those.
Yes, and it was the 1970 version of Wuthering Heights, Bill, and with a young Timothy Dalton. And it was movies were paired very strangely back then, and they were rated very strangely as well. The same year, Dad took me to see When Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth on a double bill with The Jungle Book. And When Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth was rated G, and it had full frontal nudity in it.
Yeah, good luck today. I don't think we'll see that on Disney Plus. Well, great. I hope people enjoy the trip back. Oh, Brent, you have your hand up there, so feel free to unmute yourself.
Unmute. Okay. Looking back a few weeks, you were talking about Zorro, and I am happy to report that you can find the Disney Zorro DVDs on eBay, which we are now working our way through season 1, and it's loads of fun because I have no particular memories of it when it was on originally. So,
how much did it set you back?
Well, this set me back $100, but that was in part because I decided to go with the make an offer rather than going and bidding and trying to get the last bid in at the last minute and get one that was up for much less. So, but I figured it's what, 5 or 6 DVDs. So it's like $17 a DVD for something that was limited edition and no longer in print. So.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to see how much, when I had to fight for years, and Kathy Gregory's, her husband just spoke, Kathy and I were both trying to convince Disney for years to put that thing out. And then when they did, we were saying, they had zero budget for any special features. So we did what we could to try to come up with something for it. But then they put it out in such small numbers, it sold out like instantly. I mean, it was gone in a flash. And we kept trying to convince them, try to do more with it, no, nobody would ever want to see it. Wow, that went fast. But they had already announced it was going to be a limited edition of so many, and that they didn't want to go back and change it, because then everybody else would, other limited editions, is Disney going to change the rules? So it's become hard to see. But yeah, that was great fun to work on that and tape the segment. Kathy came over and met me and sat there and kept me from making a lot of mistakes, I hope. So it was fun to work on. So yeah, maybe we'll do a return to Zorro on one of these things. So Tom Brooks mentioned, yeah, Bambi meets Godzilla. I thought I had it on my computer. It's on the computer behind me. I can't get it now. But maybe we'll do that in another one. It's a very, very short movie. Bambi meets Godzilla, and Bambi doesn't win. So we'll just let everybody know right then.
Bill?
Yeah.
Yeah, getting just a side note about the screening I saw with Dad, When Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth and Jungle Book. Talk about your bare necessities.
Oh, everybody that wants to go and visit Joey to slap him is welcome to do so. Yeah, Bambi Meets Godzilla. I have that, I think, on the same DVD that I have Mickey Mouse Goes to Vietnam. So, you know, definitely another short where, and Mickey doesn't win. So there were some very definite strange things the experimental filmmakers were making then. Yeah, Michelle's mentioned like trying to get Destination D tickets. Yeah, that Disney just sold those out instantly. So it's I had no particular desire to go someplace where I'm gonna have to wear a mask for many hours inside the day and everything. So it we're gonna skip what you call Destination D23 this particular time. Are you going, Michelle, or were we able to get tickets? Oh, you are going. Well, you'll have to give us a field trip report when you get back.
Yeah, they sold out in 10 minutes flat, so I'm guessing they're not doing full capacity. A lot of annoyed people.
Yeah, that's the
But
trouble.
yes, I'm going.
Yeah, no matter what you do, somebody's not going to be happy. You fill it up, people are going to complain about it. You don't fill it up, people are going to complain about it. I have to say, when I spoke at the one down there about the World's Fair, and that was like one of the biggest rooms of people I've ever been in. And it's like, thank God you can only see the first 6 people in the first row or something, because everything else is just black. And I'm just going to go with it. But it was, they certainly get a very enthusiastic crowd attending those. So have fun. Well, thanks all for attending. I'm going to figure out a one for next week, and have a bunch of different odds and ends to go through, and we'll do it. And again, appreciate everybody doing. Carolyn, I hope you mend and get your feet cured and back on. And Don, it's good to have you back in the co-pilot seat. So is Kenneth still with us? No, I don't. I think he dropped off. So, well, great. Appreciate everybody joining, and we will look forward to seeing you. And Dennis and Yuko, hopefully we see you soon in person. So take care, and we'll be back next week with a TBD performance. Talk to you later.
Thanks, Phil. Great job.
Thank you.